This program has been brought to you thanks to the generous contributions of our patrons on Patreon. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. And for more content like this, be sure to check out the Modern Alchemist channel on Patreon.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
The 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The principle of mentalism. 2. The principle of correspondence. 3. The principle of vibration. 4. The principle of polarity. 5. The principle of rhythm. 6. The principle of cause and effect. 7. The principle of gender. These 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may well be given at this point. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind. It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances, which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered and thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. All right, before moving forward, let's just take a couple minutes here and unpack and explore some of these ideas that have been presented to us. Specifically, I want to look at first at the idea that everything within the material universe, everything that we perceive, that we feel, that we experience with our senses, all of this is, in fact, spirit. Now, it's important to recognize that other esoteric texts are in agreement with this idea, as well as I would argue a significant number of the world religions within our world. They would also concur with this point that what we are experiencing in this frame of reference is a frame of reference of unrefined spirit, gross matter, right? And that as spirit becomes more refined, it becomes invisible to eyes which are existing within the unrefined state. It makes sense, right? That we're literally not equipped to see that which vibrates at a higher state. We just simply can't. We're built to see things which vibrate at the state wherein we reside. It's the economy of divinity, I suppose, that the eyes that we have are designed to see the world wherein we reside. So this is an important concept, especially when taken into consideration with what we have already learned about the tria prima, the 3 prime elements. Because in this short section, we mention 2 of the 3. We mention spirit and we mention mind. We're going to talk about that in a second. But in the aspect of spirit then is given the attributes of being unknowable and undefinable. And it's important to understand why it is unknowable and undefinable. the best way, the best analogy that I could conceive of for why this is to visualize yourself as a fish within the ocean. And as a fish, you can understand yourself, your fishiness, you can understand your immediate environment. But for a fish to understand that all of the water on planet Earth is connected to each other, that the oceans are connected to each other, that those oceans connect rivers and rivers connect streams, and it all works its way up and down through atmosphere and everything. For a fish to grasp all that is unknowable, right? Because the water that the fish breathes could be emblematic then of spirit, which in the fish's case goes directly into its gills and then becomes a part of its being, right? Just as we breathe, the air goes into us and becomes a part of our being. And you could, by extension, draw the analogy out so that we're the fish. And for us to understand all of the cosmos wherein we reside and all of the intricacies and connections and everything else, and how it all operates together in one great whole in spite of the paradoxical oppositions which you see at all times and all places. Yeah, that's a lot for us to grasp. And because we are in a finite state, it is not possible for a finite entity to understand the infinite. We're just not equipped. We can extrapolate and make ideas, and through the principle of correspondence, we can draw syllogisms of this is to this and that is to that. But for us to actually know the thing means that we are capable of grasping it completely from the inside and also from the outside. And for us, we can't get outside of the system. Just like a fish can't really be sustained outside of its system or its environment, right? I mean, someone out there is going to say the fish jumps out of the water, but that's still part of its environment. You take all that away from the fish, and then it's flopping around on dry land. So it's really important to grasp this idea and to recognize that the things that you're touching right now, the objects in your possession, the computer that you're using or your phone in order to listen to this podcast, that all of this is spirit, and all of it is tied together. Its structure is tied together. You don't need to understand how. All you need to know is that it is. And that opens the door to possibility for everything. Because then, if we can grasp this idea and hold on to it, there might be more that can be done with this knowledge. There might be more that can be done with this experience than simply riding through it like a surfer just riding the wave. Maybe you can choose your wave, instead of be assigned one. The next important thing to understand then is the idea that all of this, all that is spirit, is living mind. Now, in previous sections, when we've talked about mind, it's been tied to Hermes Trismegistus, and the idea of mind tied to Hermes Trismegistus is tied to the idea of Hermes, Thoth Hermes, being associated with Mercury. So Hermes being the Greek name for the Roman character Mercury, and Mercury being the alchemical symbol representing the union between spirit and matter, which would be salt. So we have sulfur and salt. And all of this we discuss at great length, if you recall, in the 3 Concept Corner videos, or the Ask an Alchemist and the 2 Concept Corner videos on the Tria Prima, the 3 prime elements of alchemy, and how they relate to mind, body, and spirit. This is new information now, to take with you, to recognize something that we discuss in those videos, which is that even when you break things up into its own categories, so that you have the category of salt, or the category of sulfur, or the category of mercury, even though you break those up, what you have is an exhibition of which element is presenting in its greatest character. And ultimately, all of these elements are still a component of the same thing, which is something that we learned as we address the writings of Manly P. Hall and the Secrets of All Ages. So this then is a link to that idea. It's a link to that concept of understanding that all things are spirit, and that all of this could be considered and thought of as universal living mind. And what is mind? Mind is the union of those two opposites, those apparent opposites, the fire and air of spirit, the water and earth of salt, coming together. And it's more than just that, because this then becomes the three sons of alchemy, the three sons of the esoteric, which represent the three aspects of consciousness that we've talked about in human alchemy and the art of thinking, so that spirit could be conceived as the objective self, and salt seen as the subjective self, and mercury being the middle self, being the union of those two other sons, the influence of those two other means of thinking, where it's objective thinking under sulfur and spirit, and it's subjective feeling thinking under salt and the body. And those two forms of thinking united become us, become who we are. It becomes how we navigate through this experience in mortality. So I felt it was really important that we stop for a minute and we take a moment and we talk about this, because this is formative then to how this material has utility, how I use it. Because by understanding this, by recognizing that there is a truth here, that this truth is experiential, meaning that you can seek it out in your meditation and feel the process of this thinking that takes place as you work yourself through the construct of seeing how all things are in fact one. And when you really look at the implication of that, and that's something to recognize in these meditations, when we go through this material, that you consider the implication of what this means. What is the burden of knowing this now? How is this going to change the way you carry yourself, the way you think about yourself, the way you think about others, the way you consider your experience? Because that's the important part of this. If this is just an academic study, it's ultimately of very little use to you. But if this is a study on how to make it through life, if this is a study on how to prosper, if this is a study on how to succeed or be happy or free yourself of the bondage that comes from just being a human being and realize a greater potential, if this is how this material is used, then I believe this is being used to its fullest effect. And its greatest utility, and this is why it exists at all. So now that we understand that, now that we can grasp the idea of mind being less than something nebulous and more something concrete, because you are that mind physically, from your head to your toes, that you are more than just your thoughts or experiences or your feelings, that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That's the magic to me of all of this, is to recognize that each of these components taken individually, they are inert in one degree or another, but combined become everything that we see, everything we feel, everything we experience. And that, to me, is the beauty of all of this, and especially of this material, when you break it down and you consider what it is that you've just read.